If you're a VAR or a third-party maintenance company or an MSP or maybe even an OEM, one of the things you might be struggling with is how to centralize all your assets and contracts and put them in one location. I struggled with this forever and had to build a system to solve it. So I want to show you our system, and maybe it'll give you a few things to think about. So basically what you're looking at here is a thing called a customer portal. This is where the customer can log in and view the things they purchased from you. This system is called Analytica. It's made for VARs, MSPs, and third-party maintenance companies and OEMs and such. But this view is for the customer. The customer can log in and they can interact with these assets. They can say, here's an asset they purchased from you. They can write what the support date is, the start and the end date, and add all these other fields to these assets. So these are the assets, but the contract is connected to this start date and this end date. And basically, in this system, you can view all the contracts, and then you can view the contract history, if it was an amendment or a renewal, and you can see the associated assets that are connected to the contract. So when you're thinking about centralizing assets and contracts, you have to think about, like, how am I going to get this data in the system, and where's it going to originate, and what's it going to look like? So if you look at this system, basically it's got the ability to have contracts and quotes that feed into a portal where the customer can view all the assets. And basically, when you think about this system, you have to think about lots of different things, like what customers are going to have access, what team members are going to have access, and how are my tools going to connect to the system. So in our system, it's got an integrated quoting system. So basically, you can build quotes for the customer, and that's going to feed contracts and assets into the system. Now, you can have your own quoting system and manually put in contracts into the system, or use a REST API to pull that stuff in there. But you need to think about where they're going to originate. So for our system, they can originate in the quoting step, where you quote things like this stuff, and has a cost, and has a sales price, and then it gets connected to, once it gets closed won, connects to a contract, and that contract, once it turns active, turns into assets and contracts that are viewable in the customer portal. Now, if you're not using a quoting system, you can pull in assets manually. That takes time, but our system has the ability to add assets via CSV import, and you also can add assets in via REST API if you have other systems you're using, like Salesforce or ConnectWise or whatever. So if you're thinking about consolidating your contracts and assets, you need to think about a few things. You need to think about where are they going to come from, who's going to access the system, and how are you going to display the information. Eventually, the customer is going to want to look at it, and eventually they're going to want to interact with it. They're either going to open up a ticket, or they're going to want to plan the life cycle of that asset. So you need to be thinking, how am I going to help the customer plan the life cycle of what they're looking at? Because they're either going to want to decommission it, get rid of it, upgrade to something else, or whatever. And we build in systems like a labeling system, so you can actually, plan the life cycle of these assets and put associated planning events to these assets too. A few things to think about when you're thinking about centralizing assets and contracts. There's a lot to the subject. It takes a while to get a system like this in place, but once you do, you're really happy, because you become the single source of truth for your customers and for your own team. It eliminates a lot of disorganization, a lot of frustration, and you can focus on selling. Hope this helps. Bye-bye.